Hey Optimancers, Chris here. So in my last video I discussed the druid subclasses in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, and I went over the optional class features. I went over the Circle of Stars subclass in detail. Today we're going to go over the Circle of Wildfire in detail. Now when it comes to the buzz that I've heard about the new subclasses in Tasha's for druid, I have to say I've primarily heard good things about Circle of Stars and not as good things about the Circle of Wildfire. And I have to disagree. And when I hear people say that the Wildfire Druid isn't so impressive, that the Circle of Stars Druid is obviously better, it tells me that I've noticed something about this that they've missed. And I think it specifically has to do with the pet. And there's something the pet can do that I think that people just aren't getting. So I'm going to be going over that today. But before we get into that, I'd like to thank some of my highest level patrons. I have a Patreon if you are interested. There is a link in the video description. These patrons are patrons of my highest level, and their support really helps me take the time to do the analysis that I do in these videos. Today, I would like to specifically thank Matt Couch, Nick Lutz, Philip Martin, Rohit, Scott Ballantyne, Scott Dunnington, TUM, and Takusin. Thank you all so much for your support. So let's talk about the Circle of Wildfire Druid. Let's get started. So first off, let's just make it clear that the Circle of Wildfire Druid is not a fire druid. If it was a fire druid, we would expect to see things like resistance to damage against fire. We would expect their additional spells to all be fire related, and we're not seeing that. And when they talk about this, they say druids of the Circle of Wildfire understand that destruction is sometimes the precursor of creation, such as when forest fire promotes later growth. These druids bond with the primal spirit that harbors both destructive and creative power, allowing the druids to create controlled flames that burn one thing but give life to another. And when we look at the abilities of this class, it's clear that fire is part of it, but growth and rebirth is also part of it. So, like with the Circle of Stars Druid, at second level we are going to get two features with the Circle of Wildfire Druid, and I think they are both really good features. The first ability we are going to get is Circle Spells. And this is a really good ability. Now, I understand that apparently with Unearthed Arcana, I think they got Fireball or something, and people are upset that Fireball has been taken off. Now, I'm not saying Fireball is not a good spell. Fireball is a good spell, and it's nice on a druid because it doesn't use concentration. But by my research, it shows that Fireball has been replaced by Revivify. This is also a really good spell that doesn't require concentration. The other thing I'll note that has changed from Unearthed Arcana is that they have added spells for second level. So we're going to get two additional preparations for free. So we are actually probably better off post Unearthed Arcana than the Unearthed Arcana version itself. So the Wildfire Druid didn't get nerfed here. The Wildfire Druid got buffed here. So let's just be clear on that. But Circle of Wildfire is going to give us additional spell preparations, two additional preparations at each of 2nd, 3rd, 5th, 7th, and 9th level. This is more spells than a Circle of the Land Druid gets added to their preparations, because the Circle of Land Druids don't get anything at 2nd level. So the Circle of Wildfire Druid is going to have more prepared spells than any other Druid, period. So we absolutely have some fire spells on there. Burning Hands is on there. Flaming Sphere, Scorching Ray, Fire Shield, and Flame Strike. Now there are a lot of these spells I'm not a huge fan of, but if you're going to put them on my prepared spell list for free, I'm happy to have them there. I've played characters that get Burning Hands, and although I don't like Burning Hands especially, I have found cases to cast it where it's effective. Usually you get a bunch of creatures that are all bunched up in that right area that you can hit them all with the Burning Hands. And so although Burning Hands doesn't do a tremendous amount of damage, and although the area is smaller than other first level area of effect spells, when that is your option and you get to hit multiple creatures with it, then the damage it does is still pretty good, better than anything else you could have done. Now I will say the one I think you're never going to cast on here is Flaming Sphere, and it's not because Flaming Sphere is a terrible spell, it's just that Flaming Sphere uses your bonus action, and this character is not going to have their bonus action available. But we also have some decent spells on here that are not fire-based. We have Cure Wounds, we have Plant Growth. Plant Growth is actually a very nice spell that it doesn't use your concentration, controls the battlefield. We have Revivify, great spell. We have Aura of Life, which is okay, circumstantial, but circumstantial spells are great if there are additional preparations, and Mass Cure Wounds. So a lot of healing theme or regrowth theme happening here. There is nothing wrong with what is being given here. And circle spells, I think, is a great feature. And how great? Well, your standard 9th level druid is at best going to be looking at 14 prepared spells at 9th level. And I think most druids were probably actually going to see 12 or 13. But the Circle of Wildfire is adding 10 to that. So that's almost doubling the number of spells prepared. That adds a huge amount of versatility to your spellcasting. And no matter what your subclass abilities are for Druid, let's just keep in mind that as a primary spellcaster, spellcasting is the best thing you can do. So adding a lot of versatility to that is really good. It's one of the best things about clerics, domain spells. Circle of Wildfire spells, just as good as domain spells, you're getting just as many. And that's something the Circle of the Land Druid can't say. But we are also getting another ability at 2nd level, and that's the Summon Wildfire Spirit. And once again, we get something we can do with our wild shape other than wild shaping. And as always, I think that additional options to use instead of using wild shape are fantastic. Now, if you are to look at the Summon Wildfire Spirit and you just see an ability that is pretty much on par with what the Artificer Battlesmith gets, or what the new Beastmaster Ranger gets, or so many other classes in Tash's Cauldron of Everything, I would totally understand why you would have that view, but I think you're wrong. I think this is better than any of those other pets, because this pet gets an ability that, number one, is going to be super useful for utility, number two, it's going to be super useful for combat tactics, and number three, it is going to allow them to do more damage in combat than any other pet almost every single round. And the ability I'm talking about is Fiery Teleportation. This is the extra ability that this pet happens to get. Now, if we look at the various pets that are available to the other subclasses, they all have some kind of special ability. It just so happens I think this one is just better than all the others. I'm going to go over that on a battle map. But before we do that, let's just go through the Wildfire Spirit. First off, it's armor class 13, not a good armor class. So I will say that if we are going up against creatures that have really good ranged attacks, or they have really good fly speed, I would consider actually hanging the Wildfire Spirit back and just doing the Flame Seed. It's not going to be your best thing for damage, but if you can keep the Wildfire Spirit safe, you only have 2 of them per short rest. I wouldn't want to waste it. So I would just take the extra damage with my bonus action. Won't be as much as I might have otherwise done, but I think keeping the Wildfire Spirit at least relatively safe is probably a good thing to do. The hit points are 5 plus 5 times your druid level. So, you know, when we get this at 2nd level, that's 15 hit points. That's not bad. And it doesn't scale probably as well as your character's hit points are going to. So you're going to have the Wildfire Spirit have a decent amount of hit points, but not as many as a PC. Now the speed is 30 feet, and with a fly speed of 30 feet with hover. And so that's really good because we can often hang it out of reach of the enemies. That's great. We get damage immunity to fire. That's no surprise. We also have a lot of condition immunities that we would expect from an elemental. So immune to charmed, frightened, grappled, prone, restrained. All of those really good things. Charmed and frightened, those are great things to be immune to. We have dark vision 60 feet with the creature. It understands the languages that you speak, and it's going to take the dodge action unless you use your bonus action to ask it to do something else. Now the 2 offensive options you have are the Flame Seed and the Fiery Teleportation. The Flame Seed is a ranged weapon attack, uses your spell attack modifier to hit, range 60 feet. You can target one creature you can see, and it does a d6 plus your proficiency bonus in fire damage. So if we think about what the Circle of Stars Druid could do with the Archer form, the Flame Seed is maybe a little bit less damage, but pretty close. Now the ability I was talking about was Fiery Teleportation. So what that does is it's going to take your creature's action in combat, and it's going to require your bonus action to set it up. And what it does is the spirit can fly where it needs to fly, and the spirit and each willing creature of your choice within 5 feet of it teleport up to 15 feet to an unoccupied space you can see. Then each creature within 5 feet of the space that the spirit left must succeed on a dexterity saving throw against your spell DC or take a d6 plus proficiency bonus fire damage. So that is the same damage that you would do with a flame seed, except you are potentially doing it to multiple creatures. And that, of course, got me thinking. So do I only use this ability when I need to teleport an ally? No. If I can hit more than one creature with a fiery teleportation, then it is going to probably do more damage than the Flame Seed ability. And if I can hit 3 creatures or 4 creatures, it's going to do a lot more damage than the Flame Seed ability, and a lot more damage than any other pet in this game is capable of doing. Also, let's just remember that there's out-of-combat applications for this as well. If you've ever played an Echo Knight, you know how valuable it is to have unlimited teleports. And you are also going to have unlimited teleports. Now, your range is only 15 feet, but on the other hand, you are applying unlimited teleports to the entire party. 15 feet can do a lot of things. It can get you up to that ledge that you would have normally had to make an athletics check for. It can get you past the bars on the cell that you're locked into. All kinds of things. This comes up usually outside of combat, but we have an hour duration with this, so we're going to have it outside of combat. And again, it is unlimited teleportation. So I would be evaluating my enemies before I go in and do the fiery teleportation in every battle. If an enemy is really strong with ranged attacks, or that enemy has a decent fly speed, then what you would probably find is that after a couple times of you doing this area of effect, the enemies might just go screw it and go after your pet. And if they do, they will kill it. Now, that's not always a bad thing. If enemies are spending a lot of attacks taking out a pet, then those are attacks that aren't taking out PCs, and that's sometimes tactically a good thing. But again, you only have 2 of these pets per short rest, so just keep that in mind. If you are just wasting your pet, then you're going to find yourself without the pet. And if you don't have the pet, then the Wildfire Druid is basically demoted to being a land druid. So in those combats where I think the Wildfire Spirit is in great danger, I would consider then maybe going back to a further range and then maybe just tossing in those flame seeds, and that's going to have a much lower impact on the combat, but it's still an advantage to be able to do something with your bonus action that does some damage, and it will probably keep your Wildfire Spirit a lot safer than if you are running into the enemies and then doing the fiery teleportation, just because area of effect damage, when it's more damage, is going to attract more attention from those enemies. So I'm going to bring up a battle map now, and what I want to go over is first about summoning the creature in the first place and that 10-foot 2d6 damage that it does. And then I want to talk about the fiery teleportation and its applications in combat. Now, when we are talking about summoning the creature, there's a good chance we're going to do it outside of combat. And I think at higher levels, that's always going to be your best bet, because the 2d6 area of effect damage using your action in combat is probably not worth it. But at low levels, 2d6, if the area is big enough and you can place it wherever you want, may end up hitting a lot more creatures than if you were to cast a Thunderwave spell, or definitely your Burning Hand spell. So here we have a battle map. Now on the left you'll see there's a blue square, and I just wanted to put that on there because when we talk about a spell that has a 10-foot radius, or we have an effect that has a 20-foot diameter, that blue square is what we're talking about. Now, it might be a circle, might be a square, depends how your DM plays it. I argue that if you use diagonal movement on a 1-for-1 basis, that all circles are squares, and that's probably a topic for a video I'll be doing pretty soon. But in either case, what we're looking at is an effect that is 4 squares wide and 4 squares tall. But when we're talking about a 10-foot emanation from a creature, then that creature space is not counted. So on the right side, we'll see what is our Wildfire Spirit right here. And if we look, we can see they're emanating an effect 10 feet around them. Now the reason I want to bring this up is because with the blue square we're talking about 16 squares. So there could be 16 medium-sized creatures within this effect and no more than that. But with our Wildfire Spirit with a 10-foot emanation from them, then we are talking about 24 squares. So that is a 50% increase in number of squares. And that is not counting the square that the Wildfire Spirit is in. And the reason I bring that up is because the Wildfire Spirit can fly and has hover. And if we're playing on a 3-dimensional map, or we're assuming a game in 3 dimensions, then there's no reason why we couldn't summon the Wildfire Spirit in the air. And if we were to summon it anywhere up to 10 feet in the air, then we would actually include the space that the Wildfire Spirit is over. So then we're really talking about 25 squares on the ground. So in combat with our Wildfire Spirit, we can do 2 different attack options. The first is we can do the Flame Seed. So this is going to give our Wildfire Spirit a single attack using our spell attack modifier. It will hit a single target, and if it does hit, then that target is going to take a d6 plus our proficiency bonus in damage. This is pretty on par with what we get from most of the pets in this game, or at least in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, is it tends to be a d4, d6, or d8 plus your proficiency bonus. The thing that makes the Wildfire Spirit better than those other pets, in my opinion, isn't the Flame Seed. It's the Fiery Teleportation. So one use of Fiery Teleportation is, let's say we have an ally, and that ally has been cornered and they are about to get killed. Well, with our Wildfire Spirit, we could move it in 5 feet above the ally, then use our Fiery Teleportation, move them 15 feet out, and then once they're out, then they can run away on their turn. But in addition, we're going to be doing damage to all 5 of these creatures. Now they make a dexterity save instead of us making it a hit roll. So if they fail the dexterity save, they take the damage. If they make the dexterity save, they don't take the damage. But I would assume that if we're hitting 5 creatures, probably 3 of them are going to fail. That is going to be triple the damage we would do even if we hit with our Flame Seed. Now it's kind of a best case scenario in this case that we might hit 5. I mean, technically speaking, we could potentially hit 9 creatures on the ground if we were to move right above a bunch of clustered creatures and then teleport away. I would say that in most rounds you're going to do well if you can hit 2. But even if you can hit 2, then that's double the damage you would do with your Flame Seed. So what I would see actually in combat with this thing is most of the time I wouldn't be using my Flame Seed at all. What I'd be doing is moving into enemies, and if there is a way that I can teleport an ally and help them, I will. But if there isn't a way I can teleport and help an ally, the Fiery Teleportation is probably a better attack than our Flame Seed because it does the same damage except as an area of effect. And we're talking about the size of a thunder wave, except we have way more ability to place it where we need it. So I'd say it's probably not going to be uncommon that you're going to hit 2 creatures or 3 creatures with your Fiery Teleportation. And so this pet is going to be doing significantly more damage in combat than other pets. Now generally what I'd probably do is I'd be hovering above the enemies. I'd fly down where I need to go, maybe 5 feet above those enemies, then do my Fiery Teleportation, teleport 15 feet up again, and then maybe use the rest of my movement to move up. And in a lot of combats, the enemies are not going to have a lot of ways to actually deal with this. If they don't have ranged attacks, they're not going to be able to attack your Wildfire Spirit at all. So this is like d6 plus proficiency bonus damage as an area of effect every turn as a bonus action. That's really good. And so when I looked at the Wildfire Spirit, that's what really stuck out to me, is just how good that Fiery Teleportation is. Now with most pets they get some kind of extra ability, but this ability here really struck me as a very powerful one. I mean, I think it would be a good ability anyways if it was just the teleportation, but the fact that we're adding the damage to the teleportation means it's probably our best attack as well. And remember, this is not limited. We can do this every round. Now, the duration of a Wildfire Spirit is 1 hour. That is not as good as the duration of a Druid Wild Shape. Druid Wild Shape at 2nd level lasts for 1 hour, but it scales with level. So when you are level 10 Druid, your Wild Shape can last for up to 5 hours. but the Wildfire Spirit only lasts for 1 hour. But I will say that if we compare it again to the Circle of Stars druid, their starry form only lasts for 10 minutes. This lasts 6 times longer than that, and I'm far more comfortable with an hour duration than I am with a 10-minute duration. At 6th level, we get the Enhanced Bond ability. When you cast a spell that deals fire damage, you're going to do an additional d8 of damage, and if you cast a spell that restores hit points, you're going to restore an additional d8 hit points. So that's like scaling your Cure Wounds by a level. In fact, if you're doing something like Healing Word, it's really like scaling it 2 levels. An extra d8 of damage on your fire spells is fine. It's not a huge deal. I have certainly done the d8 added to spell damage before, and it's okay. And the fact that it's limited to fire damage is limiting because there are a number of druid spells that do damage that aren't fire. And the other thing we get here, I think, is nice, and that is when we cast any spell with a range other than self. It doesn't even have to be a druid spell, so if we are multi-classed, we can benefit from this as well. The spell can originate from you or your Wildfire Spirit. So our Wildfire Spirit becomes like a spell platform for us. I could see this being very useful with things like cone spells, for example. Cone spells can be very difficult to get into proper positioning for. But if your Wildfire Spirit is available, and remember, your Wildfire Spirit can fly, so we can potentially cast cone spells straight down, we can potentially hit a lot more targets more easily. But essentially what we're getting here are 2 features, even though it's listed as a single feature. And both of those features are okay, and you put those features together, and I think it's pretty solid. Then our 10th level feature is called Cauterizing Flames, and what I like about this one is it is really unique. When a creature dies within 30 feet of us, has to be small or larger, this spectral flame appears in the dead creature's space, and it's kind of like a little mote, and it will flicker there for 1 minute. Now this doesn't require any action by you, it is not limited in number of uses, this just happens. Now what's limited in use is when a creature enters that space, we can use our reaction and we can either have them heal 2d10 plus our wisdom modifier or take fire damage equal to 2d10 plus our wisdom modifier. And we can do this a number of times equal to our proficiency bonus, and we get it back after a long rest. So what we're getting is just a nice little way to use our reaction. Druids don't have a lot of reaction spells, so it is nice to have some options for our reaction. 2d10 plus our wisdom modifier is not a huge amount of healing, and it is not a huge amount of damage. So this isn't a fantastic ability. But I think one thing I like about it is unique. Now you will need to keep track of where creatures have died on the battlefield. That's going to be a little bit of extra bookkeeping. Don't leave that in the hands of your DM. Keep track of it yourself as the player. They've got enough to keep track of. And when a creature enters that space and you want to use this ability, then just let the DM know that that was one of the areas where your spectral flame had appeared. And it's just going to give you a way to use your reaction and do something reasonably useful in combat. And what I applaud here isn't that this is overly powerful, it's just that I think this is unique and it's something I want to try. And then at the 14th level we get a really good ability, and that is our Wildfire Spirit can save us from death. So if our Wildfire Spirit is anywhere within 120 feet of us, so it doesn't even need to be very close, if we're reduced to 0 hit points and fall unconscious, we can have the spirit drop to 0 hit points instead, and we regain half our hit points immediately and rise to our feet. Now this is only usable once per long rest. This is pretty dramatic. When you fall to 0 hit points, your 14th level, you have a lot of hit points. Getting half your hit points back immediately is a pretty big thing. And essentially all it's costing you is 1 use of your wild shape. So I think that's a pretty good ability. So like with Circle of Stars, I don't think there's any bad abilities for the Circle of Wildfire Druid. And there are some abilities I think are really good. In fact, I think the best abilities you get are at 2nd level, and I really like both of them. Giving me a whole bunch more prepared spells when I'm a full spellcaster. That is a fantastic gift. And then the Wildfire Spirit, I'm going to be doing that every time with my wild shape. That is just better than using wild shape as far as I'm concerned. And it's going to be better than using Find Familiar as far as I'm concerned as well. And although the 1 hour duration is not as high as wild shape, it is at least significantly more than 10 minutes. And I'm far more comfortable with 1 hour. I think if we use this twice, we got a pretty good shot of getting to our next short rest. Now, the other thing I'll say is if we lose our Wildfire Spirit, we are still a druid with almost double as many prepared spells. So that is the Circle of Wildfire, and I am quite a fan of it, to be honest. I think that Circle of Stars has some abilities that are more potent, but because of the limitation of the duration of the Starry form, I might be more comfortable playing a Circle of Wildfire Druid knowing that I'm going to have access to my great abilities for longer. And unlimited teleports for the entire party outside of combat is something I am definitely going to use. I've played an Echo Knight and I found that the unlimited teleports just for myself are super useful. And I'm just thinking how good it would have been if I could have included the entire party in that. And it would have been great. And so that is something that I'm excited to try with the Wildfire Druid. It's something that might actually make me consider just taking a 2-level dip in Wildfire Druid, because this is a very strong ability. So that is the Circle of Wildfire. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought of the Circle of Wildfire Druid. Otherwise, until next time, I'm going to sit back, relax, and have some fun. D&D is for everyone. Thanks, everyone. Talk to you next time.